Welcome to another edition of the podcast, Conversations with and for Entrepreneurs We Love. My name is Craig Oldham. I'm with Mahdlo Executive Advisors. Thank you guys for joining. And with me today is Josh Reverand. He is the director of Gap International. He's been there for about 6 years, and I've known Josh in Gap International for quite a long time. As I was the CMO, I actually took a number of their classes, which we'll probably get into. But Josh, it's great to see you again, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Craig. Always love catching up, and really appreciate you having me on and speaking to your audience of entrepreneurs who I hope to come to love. I know I love them. And, just a word about Gap International. We're a management consulting firm, thrilled to be partnering with you, Craig, and Mahdlo. And been around for about 40 years now. Many of my colleagues have been there the entire time, and I'm thrilled to join them for the last 6. And we partner with executives, everything from the Fortune 200 all the way to entrepreneurs who are committed to creating breakthrough performance, breaking the current reality of their business to see what else is possible, what ambition that they have that they want to see realized in the world. So, I think it's a beautiful partnership that we're building at Mahdlo and Gap International.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So the reason we had Josh on is, part of the 4 things we always talk about around building a growth engine are strategy, a process, velocity, technology, and organizational design. And a lot of times what we get, and we tend to think about them in sequentially in that order. And one of the things that we often get from entrepreneurs and CEOs is really this idea of, okay, so I get to this piece, I have my strategy, I've got my technology, my process is in line, I'm ready to go. I think I've got the right people. How do I kind of connect the gaps between the organizational design, my agencies, all the resources that I have, and ensuring that those people and those resources will deliver on my strategy, right? So this is kind of like making it that 360, full circle view of this. So getting from your perspective, Josh, and from Gap's perspective, what do you think are some of the key organizational building blocks to really helping put that circle together and meet their goals?
Yeah, you set it up perfectly. Having that strategy that we often look at that as, maybe it's a vision or an ambition or something that a leader or a team sees as possible. Maybe not probable, maybe not predictable, but definitely possible to go out and achieve. And how do we actually align the business to go do that? And for us, particularly from a people perspective, because we really come from that people are the key to realizing any strategy. You can have the strategy, you can have the technology, but the people who are actually going to go realize it are the people. Okay. And from our perspective, there's 3 main keys, and that's mindset, environment, and leadership. And I'll talk to each a little bit. Mindset in particular, it's become a bit of a buzzword these days, and rightly so. And when we talk about mindset, we're talking about whatever level of success that a company currently has, their current trajectory, their current formula for success and operating. Behind that formula for success is thinking that drives what actions that people take, what decisions they make. And that often is driven by assumptions about what we should and shouldn't do, what we've tried in the past, what we haven't tried in the past, what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked in the past. And it's critical when you're going after a strategy that's new, bold, ambitious. It's going somewhere that you've never gone as a company before. And to go somewhere you've never gone, in our view, you have to think something you've never thought. As a leader, as a team, as an organization. And it's not somewhere that you always look at as an organization for what are we thinking that has brought us to where we are today. So when we say focusing on mindset is critical to realizing a strategy and delivering the kind of performance you're committed to, we're talking about what are the assumptions in the background, the thinking, the mindsets, where the mind is set either individually or collectively, that could potentially, though they've been successful, be a barrier to new ways of operating, new ways of thinking, that could open up doors to the kind of performance and the kind of decisions that the new strategy will take. Because anybody who's gone after a new strategy, you know that whatever plan you have doesn't survive first contact. Something will come. And how do you free up your people to make quick decisions, make decisions like they've never made before when those new scenarios arise? For us, it's really bringing that thinking to the surface to bring awareness to it. We're not saying throw out the success formula. We're saying be aware of what the success formula is, because there may be other choices accessible to you once you have that your hands around that mindset.
You know, Josh, it's interesting when you say mindset, and the thing that comes to mind is you always have that one person, right, that said, "Hey, we've tried that before." Right? It's like it always feels like it's the death, not just to, you know, I think the cliche is it's death of innovation, but it's often death of your strategy, right? When you've got that person at the table, you're in a brainstorming session, you've got everybody in their mindset, the coffee, the donuts are all set, and then they're like, "Well, we've tried that before," and "Well, we've tried that before," right?
Absolutely.
It's tough, man. It's tough.
And God bless them. I'm glad we have those people, because we need realists. Like everybody, you don't want to make the same mistakes you've made before. But this goes to my third point about what keys to actually really have a successful strategy is the kind of leadership it takes. The leadership it takes to go somewhere you've never been before takes the kind of leadership to have those kinds of conversations. To, one, stick to what you're committed to, the strategy. It takes a different kind of commitment to commit to something you've never achieved before than it does to lead a known trajectory in a known space. And I know you can speak to this firsthand with your experience with us at Tesco, what it takes to have to hear those concerns, because they're valid concerns. We've tried this before. And to get curious about, okay, what were we thinking when we tried that before? What assumptions did we make that maybe had that not work in the past? How can we leverage what we were thinking before and apply it to the scenario that's in front of us now?
Yep.
What decisions might we make differently that could make this not a repeat of a past mistake or something that didn't work? And there's no guarantee that it will work in this time. But where we come from is that you don't know that it won't, because it hasn't happened yet. And bringing that predictive frame of, well, it didn't work then, it won't work now, is just closing a door.
Yeah.
And to achieve the kind of things that I know your clients are out to achieve, they need to have as many doors open as possible.
Yeah.
To have that strategy really be realized, and to have people really fully free to execute at their highest potential. And really bringing that mindset and the leadership to bring that mindset to light is key to having people opening doors instead of closing them.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, I think the interesting thing that you talk about here, certainly around leadership, but as you kind of walk into the C-suite and you see the leadership team, they kind of have this, and I know you guys talk about this breakthrough thinking, right? So that they go beyond the impossible, think about things in the ways that you've never thought about them before. But it's often cascading that same mindset and thinking throughout the organization, right?
Yeah.
And that takes strong leadership, right?
Absolutely. It takes, taking on growing a business to a place that it's never been before, level of performance. We stand for that. It also takes requisite growth in the leadership capabilities of the leaders themselves. Because if they had been leading the way necessary to have a double the size business, for example, their business probably would have doubled. I mean, it could be considered a narrow-minded way of looking at it, but in my experience, my own experience of it, as I grow, those around me grow. As my ability to stand for breakthrough grows, so does those around me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That takes a lot of work. You definitely have to work at it, and you've definitely got to help train your leaders to think that way, right?
Yeah.
I think it goes along the lines, and we talk about this a lot when you're hiring people within the organization, especially within the sales and marketing role. Let's pick on marketing for a moment. Is that you tend to hire people that tactically you need to get something done, right? I need somebody to send email out. I need somebody to do some creative assets. I got a punch list thing I got to get through. Let me just hire somebody. And I think the short-sighted thing that you can always do in an organization, which ladders up to this leadership question, is we always say hire strategically first and outsource the tactical, right? So that you really get people that think more strategically, they understand your business, and they're in a better position to be leaders in the future, and they're much easier to kind of groom that way, right?
And that's a really interesting way of looking at it. I like that approach a lot, Craig. Hire strategically, outsource tactically, and that's something that could be, like you said, we would call it automatic to hire tactically, like the easy road to follow, the known road, follow the known road. And the other piece about strategic, like creating that strategic environment, kind of leads into that third key that I was talking about earlier, was individually strategic people are important, absolutely. How do you create an environment for that kind of strategic thinking? How do you create an environment where strategic thinking can be collaborative, can be additive? And this goes to this right hand in hand with mindset and leadership. Is, businesses don't grow in a vacuum. Leaders don't lead in a vacuum. We all work together. That people are the key, not as individuals, but collectively. So whoever you're hiring on, whether they're tactically or strategically, how do you create the kind of environment where people are unleashed, really, truly have the ability to question each other, to voice concerns, to take risks for things that wouldn't normally, I'm not talking about financial risks or legal risks. I'm talking about the things that, we don't really do that here. We've never tried it that way. How do you create an environment as a leader where people are willing to go places that they wouldn't normally have gone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And all of that, I mean, there's no leap to make why that's important for a big new important strategy, and that really comes in to creating the kind of leadership who can really bring those mindsets to the forefront. And you said earlier it takes a lot of work to have that kind of leadership. Yes, absolutely, it does. But I think it also takes an awareness of elements of leadership that aren't necessarily critical for the day-to-day running of a business.
Mm-hmm.
And bringing the awareness of thinking, mindset, and environment to the forefront is not something that we have to do every day to run a successful business. But it is critical, in our view, for taking a business to a breakthrough kind of zone, really a different level of performance.
Well, you're exactly right, and I love that you brought up breakthrough, because I've been through the executive challenge course before, and I love this concept because it really helps you and gives you the tools that you need as a leader, and also the mindset that you need to create, right? And it really puts you into takes you out of your comfort zone, I should say, because a lot of times what you do when you're going through your planning process, you're going to say, okay, so I really want to get my bonus, so I'm not going to stretch myself too far, right? I'm just going to stretch myself far enough so that my bosses and the leadership team will accept the number, right? So if they'll take 5%, I'll do 5, right? Reluctantly. Now, I think the thing that you get with breakthrough is this idea of, hey, let's set some really audacious goals out there. Let's build these things. Let's think about, okay, what if we actually thought this way? What would change, right? And I think it's not just thinking about that as completely being, absurd. It's about what would happen if we got to breakthrough, how would the game change? Right. And
Absolutely.
that's honestly, we talk about that a lot in our kind of growth maturity model. And that's kind of stage 5, that you fundamentally can change your sector if you think about things in a breakthrough way. Right. And we often say, like, so if the market is growing at 10% and you're only growing at 5, you're shrinking. Right. So thinking about it that way and thinking beyond that is amazing, right? And can really lead to some really interesting things. Now, I think on the leadership side, you got to make sure you incent people to do those things correctly, but it all kind of starts with this mentality around it.
No, you painted that picture beautifully. I mean, breakthrough is about breaking whatever the current reality is. Every business has a current reality. What we're good at, what we're not, what markets we approach, what markets we don't, how our customers see us, what we can ask of our customers. And behind every one of those questions is thinking and assumptions that are probably very valid, have come with all kinds of research and experience and everything that the company's done to get to where they are now. And we don't take it lightly when we say take on a breakthrough goal, something audacious like you were saying. We mean it very specifically for a specific purpose. Because when you take on something that you don't know how, you can't stretch to get there.
Yeah.
The road ends at a cliff and you say, I don't know how to get there anymore. All that's left is to break the thinking. Start taking apart those assumptions. What if we could go into that market? Why haven't we ever considered this with our customers? Those questions start to come.
Yeah.
And it really takes something as leaders to create the environment where people are willing to take that step.
Yeah.
Where your fellow leaders are willing to stand next to you and also take that step. Where you're ready to take the organization to question themselves and be creative and entrepreneurial, to ask those questions and voice the concerns that come along with them. Yeah. It's an exhilarating space.
It really is. And you know what? It's worth talking about because it's so rare. It happens so rare in the world that we actually know the people that have been able to create breakthrough that completely changes their sector. You think about Steve Jobs, you think about Jeff Bezos, you think about Elon Musk, right? So all of those guys, you know their names, right? Yeah. Because it is so rare that they become famous in the business world. And, you know, kind of building those things out, but just thinking about that and saying, hey, you know, take Steve Jobs, for example, he's a master at breakthrough thinking and the way that he thought about things and not just really putting himself into a box, right? You look at Jeff Bezos and he wanted to create an online bookstore, but ended up creating an amazing e-commerce, like them or not like them, but actually making most of their money off of, you know, AWS and their warehouse services. So it's pretty crazy, but it can fundamentally change you.
Fundamentally, absolutely.
So when you, Josh, just to flip this around a little bit, so you can think about mindset, environment, and leadership. And I know a lot of times you guys talk about affinity and how affinity is so important in driving, having an organizational design, organizational agility kind of drive strategy. Can you talk a little bit about affinity and what that means in this context?
Absolutely. You know, I mentioned earlier, Gap's been around for 40 years and 40 plus actually. And we've been, my colleagues have been studying for that entire time, what differentiates really high performing teams, and not just the teams that perform great once or twice, but really can repeatedly go there and have access to that kind of high performance. And we distinguished 5 key factors, and affinity being one of them. I'll talk to the others later, but affinity, when we talk about affinity, we mean the connection between people. How connected are you with another? And a lot of times as leaders, we're looking for what are the outputs that we have from our teams, our organizations, what can we produce? And we really focused in on affinity as being one of the key inputs that if a leader or an organization really wants to create breakthrough, to lead a new level of performance, the connection between them, their coworkers, their peers, their colleagues, everyone, is absolutely critical to the speed and ease of how work goes on a day-to-day basis. I mean, Craig, if I ask you, like, if you were to think of any of the favorite teams that you've been on, whether, at work, if you played sports in the past, from school, I don't know. If you think about those teams, what about it made it your favorite?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I often this is why Affinity. So I think it's just so important. Is those teams are the ones where you're like, listen, I don't mind getting up on Saturday morning to help out somebody. I don't mind having the extra conversation. I don't mind challenging them, and I don't mind them challenging me. And you can't really point to any particular thing that the team's made up of, other than, hey, I guess I would say I like them, right? And you want to challenge them, and you also respect them. They respect you, but it's often that intangible thing. Because I remember even as a young manager hiring, you go and you say, hey, I want to hire the best people with the best resumes, and certainly hire smarter than me and all those buzzwords. But when it really comes down to it, you can have somebody that maybe has a little bit less skill, but has, I think, as you would say, an affinity, and you see a lot of potential in them, and they will gel well with the team, and they always get along. And I always felt like meetings flowed better. People were more willing to put in just more than the standard kind of 8 to 9 hours a day, and they thought harder about the business. They actually cared.
That's I couldn't have said it better. I mean, the ability to challenge and be challenged, to be there for each other, care about how people actually perform. I mean, I think back to a team that I was leading a few years ago that particularly stands out for me. And because we shared in each other's successes and celebrated each other's successes, we also shared in each other's failures and mistakes.
Yeah.
That connection of, no man left behind kind of mentality. I'm reading this series right now. It was referred to me by a colleague. It's been really great. It's a series of books by Jack Carr. He's a former Navy SEAL. And anybody who's ever heard anything about the SEALs or any of the TED Talks, I mean, they talk about their brotherhood all the time. That connection, that they're like a unit, just one group all the time. And what I particularly appreciate in these books is he really doesn't gloss over it. It's not an assumption that they just are connected. Connection takes work. Affinity takes work. In a marriage, it takes work. In a relationship, it takes work to stay connected with your friends, your partners, whoever it may be. And I think that's a critical piece that is, when you're going somewhere that's risky, scary, potentially a new strategy that's challenging, having people be connected and having each other's back and willing to go the extra mile for each other can really be the differentiator in some cases to whether or not something is seen all the way through.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I mentioned speed. People move faster when they like each other. You're quicker to answer a request or pick up the phone.
Right.
I mean, it's one of those little things that just multiply it. If you and I are connected, but then you multiply it by 10 on a team or 1,000 in an organization, what becomes possible if people are connected that way? And if leaders have their eye on creating that kind of connection at the workplace. It's really remarkable how much of an accelerator that can be.
Well, it's interesting you bring the military up, and I often put that in the realm of this for sports too. And I know we use a lot of those in business, those analogies, but it's very true. And I think affinity is one of the most important things in building this championship team mentality, right? So you say, hey, I've got either we're going to go into a battle sequence with my colleagues, and it's life and death, right? Which we don't have in business, or it's a sports team where basically these collection of people are put together and they are analyzed under a microscope on their performance. And often what you see in both of these scenarios, the ones that perform best are just that intangible chemistry that you really can't put your finger on. It just all kind of works.
And everybody has that experience somewhere in their life. It might be a group of friends, it might be a church group. And we come from that doesn't happen automatically. That happens through means that can be replicated, and not from a place of manipulation, but really from a place of purpose.
Yeah.
Because when it really comes down to it, if everyone working in the same business, the kind of businesses that we're talking about, that we work with, that you partner with, they're out to achieve some purpose in the world that they really care about.
That's right.
They're there because they care about what they're doing. And bringing that to the forefront, everyone can connect to the purpose of why they're there.
Yeah.
Why they do what they do.
For sure. So true. All right. So let's get down to brass tacks, Josh. So I've got Affinity. I get it. Affinity is important. We got the intangible pieces of it. So let's talk a little bit about, the gap assessment tool and how do you go about measuring affinity? I mean, I have no idea other than, hey, I see everybody talking at the water cooler. How do I kind of nail that down? I'm a CEO. I've got 100 people working for me. How do I know they all have affinity?
Yes. Well, it's one of those things that, we really hit our head against the wall because we were asking the same questions. We could see how critical it was. How do we actually make this tangible for people? Beyond the, oh yeah, I know I like this team better than that team. And so those 5 key elements that I referenced earlier, affinity being one of them, in our studies, we found that there were 5 particular elements of a breakthrough environment. Affinity, the connection between people. Ownership, the ability to own each other's outcomes, each other's successes and failures. Interdependence, not independence, but interdependence, working and thinking collaboratively together, sharing and questioning. Purpose, the connection to why you're there, who you're with, what are we out to achieve together. And risk, which I also referenced earlier, the capacity in a team or organization to do the unconventional, do what's normally thought of as not the norm, or have the conversations that are hard to have. So you put those 5 together: affinity, ownership, interdependence, purpose, and risk. For us, we saw that the teams that were the highest performers, those championship teams, the Navy SEALs, they have that in spades, all 5 of them. So we set out and we created what we call the performance diagnostic. And it's a diagnostic tool that's administered to teams and leaders that measures those 5 elements in relationship to the leader and their connection with their team with each other, and the team inside of the larger organization, giving you a 360 view of what is the working environment here. What is this team and this leader's or the entire organization's capacity to produce breakthrough results based on their affinity, ownership, interdependence, purpose, and risk with each other. And it's, leaders who deploy this tool, they get a quantified histogram of how they, as leaders in connection with their team and their team with each other, how they score in these 5 factors. And what's really fascinating is that in the normal day-to-day operations of the business, you don't need any of these 5 to be at super high levels in order to have a successful business. we're not measuring for how can you be good at what you already do. Mm-hmm. This tool is measuring for what's the capacity to go somewhere else, to deliver that new strategy, to deliver a breakthrough, to change the game entirely. And when we quantify those numbers, the numbers tell you where you sit. And where the value comes is, why are those numbers those numbers? Mm-hmm. Like, for example, I was working with a team that their affinity score, so it's on a 0 to 10 scale, and it's entirely anonymized, so no one knows who answered what. And as a team, their experience with each other and how they scored was they had a lower affinity with each other, lower connection, in like the 5 or 6 range. It was fine. Nobody really, like, there wasn't animosity, but it wasn't like we're going to have a beer after work either. And their ownership score was really high. It was like an 8.5. And we asked them about the dynamic on the team when we looked at those two scores paired with each other, and they said, "Oh, we always get the job done. Anybody's falling behind, we make sure we jump on them, we get them the resources, we figure out, and we always deliver." And we asked them about how that was, and they didn't really enjoy it. It was kind of one of those, like, command and control, get the job done at all costs. We might leave a few bodies in the wake, but man, we're going to deliver. And it was a real drag. It was a real drag for them to work that way. Yeah. People's experience was that they were exhausted. It was hard to take on the next thing. When the next project came down the pipe or the next breakthrough was asked for, and eyes would roll and, oh, who's going to drag us down this time? So all that to say that the numbers are important, and quantifying the environment is important because it brings to light the kinds of conversations that may have gone unsaid for months or years on teams. Just the way we work is the way we work. Mm-hmm. But by quantifying these 5 elements, it brings the conversation for, well, what else is possible? Yeah. We have to continue working that way. Could we find other ways to work? And for leaders who administer this across an organization or across multiple teams, it gives them an immediate view of, well, what is our capacity to really produce? What interventions could I have? How could I grow my leaders? What technologies or what changes to my organization would I want to make? Seeing that, okay, maybe we have high capacity here to change, but maybe not over here on this side of the organization. You know, it's priceless for leaders to have that kind of map for where is my capacity to lead growth right now within my organization, and what do I want to bring to bear to increase our capacity in that way.
Sounds so, I think we've had this idea in business for a while, especially having worked at a lot of large organizations, but it's been called a culture survey, right? And so you go out and you measure culture, how are you feeling? If it was your choice, would you be here in 3 years? Well, who's going to answer no to that, right? Yes. There's nothing really you can do with it at the end other than to say, I think I've got a good leader because, they brought in donuts the day of the survey. But I think the reason I like this so much is that it really does begin to quantify all the different aspects of that, and it gives you kind of where you need to work. And yes, as we were saying before, having leaders and leadership, it gives them tangible things that they can work on to build out these 5 attributes, right? Which is what you want. You don't want your leaders to say, "Oh, next time I'll just buy donuts," like Jimmy did.
Donuts help. I never say no to donuts. But really, it's the focus on if you're low in affinity as a leader, how can you think differently? How can you act differently? If affinity could be a critical pathway to delivering the kind of strategy that you want to execute on. Yeah. What would be possible if we were more connected? Yeah. How could I connect with my team in a way that I maybe haven't before? How could I lead them connecting with each other in ways that we haven't had to before? What could that make possible in the growth of our organization? Having this quantified, like you said, it brings to light those kinds of questions and possibilities that is immeasurably valuable for any leader or anybody looking at an organization and wondering, what is this organization really capable of?
Yeah.
And what's needed to take them to the next level?
Yeah. So how big of a group can you do these with? Can you do it for, if I'm a CEO, can I do it for my whole organization? Should I do it for a leader? What do I do?
Oh, absolutely. We do everything from single team administrations where a leader wants to take his team to a new place to we work with an 80,000 person multinational mining company who has deployed this across most of their organizations. So, and the CHRO gets this beautiful histogram that's like a heat map of all greens and yellows and reds and broken out by business unit, broken out by country. So it's everything from I know my team can go somewhere to I'm the CEO of a Fortune 200 company. I want to get a diagnosis of our environment.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I love that it's with the CHRO. I think that is probably a whole nother podcast, but I think that's one of the most underutilized C-suite level people at organizations. It just feels like, this is a great tool for them to be able to contribute to growth for sure.
Absolutely. I think the CHRO is going to see a lot of growth in the next decade.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. We're excited to. We're partnering. We just a brand new partnership with Gap International and Mahdlo. We have a 100-day plan that we look at, kind of our 4 elements of growth, as we were saying before: strategic alignment, sustainable velocity, customer technologies, and organizational agility. And as Josh and I were talking months ago, it was like, this just seems like a no-brainer for us to be able to offer this to our clients as a full package to say, let's have our strategy, our process, technology, and people all aligned so that we can come in and say, hey, where do we help break down those barriers to growth and remove the stallers? And I think this is like one of those places where we often come in, we're saying, hey, this is how you should design it. This is what we're looking at. They deploy it. How do you know? Especially if you have an installed team already. Again, it gives you a great diagnostic for that and a great starting point, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the next steps too, of how do we then take from wherever we are as an environment, as a team, to wherever we want to be.
That's right. That's right. And when you're doing that, you get breakthrough, you get crazy, you change the game in your sector, you get exponential growth, and you become famous in the business world.
Everybody wants it. They can have it.
Hey, Josh, thanks for joining today. Really appreciate it. This was an amazing conversation around building a great organization and understanding how they can help you deliver on your strategic goals.
Thanks, Craig. Really enjoyed it. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you.